He lived in the apartment right below my husband and me. It started with constant complaints, escalated to him calling the cops on us multiple times, and eventually turned into him leaving threatening messages on our car and front door. When we first moved in, he was already upset with the landlord for renting the unit above him. He left plenty of unpleasant notes and even interrupted several conversations we had with the landlord. At the time, we only had a mattress, no other furniture, but he kept calling the landlord, claiming we were moving furniture around at 2 a.m. and blasting the TV at full volume. After the 8th complaint in just 2 months about us moving furniture and the TV being too loud, we finally had the landlord come up and see our apartment. We literally didn't even own a TV and still only had the mattress. That's when the neighbors started leaving notes on our car, telling us to keep it down. One note even said, "There needs to be no noise after 10 p.m. or else I'll call the cops." The thing is, we usually didn't get home until after 11 p.m., and we were always respectful about keeping quiet, knowing not everyone shared our late work schedule, so we became even more careful. Still, there were so many nights when we'd be eating dinner, cuddling quietly, or even asleep, and he'd be banging on his ceiling our floor. After a few months, he started calling the police. It got to the point where even the cops told him to stop calling about noise complaints, saying it was a landlord issue. Every time they showed up, they never heard anything. The last time the cops came, I was asleep, and my husband spoke with them. They suggested we file a harassment complaint. Then, the same officers showed up at the coffee shop where I worked and told me they were getting almost nightly calls from him. They also encouraged me to consider filing a harassment complaint. Soon after, he began leaving threatening notes on our car and front door. We'd hear our doorknob jiggle late at night. One note said that he and a friend had sat outside our apartment for 2 hours listening to all the noise we were making. He claimed he was a retired cop and said he'd call in a few favors if we kept it up. He warned us that he knew where we parked and that we'd better start parking somewhere else if we didn't want our car to get damaged. We saved all the notes, made copies, and gave them to the landlord just to keep him in the loop before things got worse. We told him straight up, we're tired of this, and if this old guy finally gets what's coming to him, just know it's been a long time coming. The final complaint was when he ran outside to the landlord, screaming that something had to be done about us because he heard our bed squeak the night before. He ranted about how he can't believe the landlord rents to crazy college kids who party and have sex all night. That was the last straw. The landlord told him to fuck off and stop being a bitter old man. And just like that, the neighbor did a complete 180. We later found out he had decided to sue the landlord and was planning to move. Suddenly, he started offering us rides when we were walking. He stopped complaining and stopped leaving notes, but the doorknob still kept jiggling, always around midnight. Whenever we'd check, we'd hear someone running down the hallway. Eventually, he moved out, and shockingly, in the 3 years since, we haven't gotten a single complaint from any other neighbor. We rented a house that had another apartment in the basement. The lady who lived below us mostly kept to herself, so we didn't see her much. Part of our rental included a detached garage, and she asked if she could put a small deep freezer in there. We were using it for storage, so we were fine with it. After a couple of weeks, the freezer somehow got unplugged. She completely lost it and demanded that we pay to replace everything. I understood her frustration, but we hardly ever went into the garage since it was only for storage. In other words, we definitely didn't unplug it, and our landlord agreed. But she was pissed. She had a son in college who came home for the summer. During that time, he found a cat and brought it home. His mom didn't allow cats inside, so he fed the kitten outside. She was pretty wild. When he went back to school in the fall, we noticed the cat was getting very thin. We started feeding her outside in her usual spot. Around Christmas, we bought a bag of cat food, and I made a plate of cookies. We left them both at our neighbor's front door. The next day, they were both back on our porch. Rude. Whatever. We kept feeding the cat, because clearly she wasn't. A few weeks later, the cat came to our door crying. Tried to come inside. It was super weird, considering she was pretty wild, and we'd never let her inside before. I let her in and realized she was pregnant and definitely about to have babies. I made her a little corner, and she gave birth the next day. We let her stay in the house with us, but we knew we couldn't keep her. I went downstairs to talk to our neighbor. She said her son's cat was a boy, so the cat we had couldn't possibly be his. I posted on Facebook to see if anyone was interested in fostering a cat and her kittens, since we couldn't keep them. Her son saw my post and got super mad at his mom. Then, she called the cops and claimed I had stolen her cat and lied when she confronted me about it. It was the stupidest, most frustrating situation I've ever dealt with when it comes to neighbors. Didn't mean to leave you wanting more. Honestly didn't think people would care so much about this story. The police called animal control, and they reached out to us. They asked us to take the cat and her kittens to the shelter, so that, if our neighbor really wanted them, she'd have to pay the fees and get them vaccinated and licensed. We took them to the shelter, and as far as I know, she did pay to pick them up. But not long after that, I saw the cat on the shelter's Facebook adoption page. Poor baby. For the record, I was heartbroken to take her there. I felt awful for moving her and her babies around like that. I'm sure she was anxious and scared. We would have kept her, but we were moving to a new place that same week, and we weren't allowed to have pets. All the authorities involved thought she was nuts. I think they were just as frustrated to deal with such a ridiculous situation. When my wife and I moved into our house in the summer of 2019, the neighbors on either side of us warned us about the people renting the house directly behind ours. Apparently, they had a reputation for causing trouble and blowing things way out of proportion, bordering on paranoia about everyone around them. We kept that in mind, but had no issues for the first 6 months or so after moving in. Their house sits on a hill behind ours, overlooking the majority of our backyard due to the elevation difference. Well, one night, technically morning, at about 3 a.m., we woke up to ring notifications on our phones. The video from our front doorbell showed a man standing barefoot in a sleeveless shirt, pounding on our front door. We waited 2 to 3 minutes, just watching him on the app, thinking maybe he was drunk and had the wrong house, basically giving him the benefit of the doubt. But then we started to hear him yelling, "Come out, you fucking pussy. I'm gonna fuck you up," and other threats. He left the porch and started heading around the side of the house, toward our backyard. Since we had no idea who this was, my wife immediately called the police while I moved out of the bedroom toward the external doors to look and listen for any sign of a break-in. At this point, our neighbors directly behind us threw a huge spotlight into our backyard from theirs. We thought, okay, cool. They know something is up and they'll try to help by lighting up our yard. The cops arrived several long minutes later and knocked. We explained what happened, and they headed out back to look around and talk to the neighbors with the spotlight. It turns out, The guy who had been on our porch was the spotlight neighbor. He had jumped our fence into our backyard, then up into his own yard, and turned on the light. He told the police that a few nights earlier, I had let my puppy out into my own backyard in the middle of the night, and because I was in my boxers, I was trying to expose myself to his family. His reasoning: they could look down into our entire backyard from where their house sat on the hill. He then showed the police his evidence, which were videos he had taken through our windows of my wife and me inside our home, doing completely normal things like chores, watching TV, and just living. Nothing inappropriate or scandalous. Not that it would have mattered anyway. We were in our own home because of the elevation difference. If they went out of their way, they could technically slightly see through our closed blinds from their angle. But the fact that they had been filming us for no reason and expected the police to take that seriously? Insane. The cops came back in, and my wife was devastated. It was a huge invasion of our privacy and completely unfounded. We had never even interacted with these people, let alone done anything to upset them. The police basically told us, just don't worry about it. If you try something again, give us a call. Not the most comforting advice. They moved out a few months later without any more issues. The day we saw the moving van in their driveway, my wife and I celebrated like it was a holiday.